What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Attican here doing an update on Julian Assange's trial out of London. His hearing for extradition resumed today, and I just got the newest update, so I wanted to share that. Again, where I'm at right now is AssangeDefense.org. People want to check that out. So Christian Grothhoff was the first witness to stand this week. German computer science professor Christian Grothhoff, who testified about his research into the timeline of events surrounding the 2011 publication of the unredacted State Department cables. 3 of the 18 counts against Assange charge him specifically for publishing the unredacted cables, and Grothhoff's testimony establishes that WikiLeaks was not the first outlet to publish that archive, that others published it first and have not been prosecuted for doing so, and that WikiLeaks took care to encrypt the file, but actions outside of Assange's control led to its release. Grothhoff went through the timeline in his statement and on the stand. In the summer of 2010, WikiLeaks shared the diplomatic cables with Guardian journalist David Lee. And let me show you a picture of this guy. His name is Christian Grothhoff or Grothhoff. I'm not really sure which one it is. Let me share my screen. Oh, wrong one. There he is. In the summer of 2010, WikiLeaks shared the diplomatic cables with the Guardian journalist David Lee via an encrypted file on a temporary website, along with a strong passphrase to decrypt it. Assange had written just part of the passphrase down on paper. WikiLeaks and its media partners began publishing the redacted cables in November 2010 in the release known as Cablegate. WikiLeaks was then subject to distributed denial of server attacks, which took the site down or made it very difficult to access. So it encouraged supporters to create mirrors of the site, replications of site data on different servers, and hundreds of people did so. In February 2011, Lee and fellow Guardian reporter Luke Harding published a book on working with WikiLeaks and Assange, in which one chapter title was the full passphrase, which could be used to decrypt the file containing the set of unredacted cables. On August 25th, 2011, German weekly Der Freitag published an article explaining that the password Lee and Harding revealed could be paid with an encrypted file to find the documents. The article doesn't say exactly what the password is or where exactly the file could be found, but it provided enough clues that sufficiently tech-savvy readers could figure it out. Der Spiegel then confirmed the story, and on August 31st, Nigel Perry published, Guardian investigative editor David Lee published his top-secret Cablegate password, revealing names of U.S. collaborators and informants in his book, in which he says exactly what the passphrase was. When WikiLeaks discovered that this information was public, Assange and fellow WikiLeaks staff member Sarah Harrison called the State Department to warn them that the cables were online unredacted. Those warnings were ignored. Crypto.me, a US-based leak site well known in the tech community, published a file containing the fully unredacted cables. Crypto.me has never been prosecuted for publishing that file. Later that day, WikiLeaks posted an editorial. Guardian journalists negligently disclosed Cablegate passwords. And on September 2nd, WikiLeaks published the unredacted cables. As Glenn Greenwald wrote that day, once WikiLeaks realized what had happened, they notified the State Department, but faced a quandary. Virtually every government's intelligence agencies would have had to access to these documents as a result of these events, but the rest of the world, including journalists, whistleblowers, and activists identified in the documents, did not. At that point, WikiLeaks decided, quite reasonably, that the best and safest course was to release all the cables in full so that not only the world's intelligence agencies, but everyone had them, so that steps could be taken to protect the sources, and so that the information in them was equally available. On cross-examination, the prosecution attempted to suggest that WikiLeaks shared the full archive with all 50 media partners that it worked with on Cablegate. But Grothoff said there is no evidence for that, and he suggested the prosecution didn't do their homework as far as the chronology of publication. He pointed to David Lee's book, in which it's clear that Assange was reluctant to hand over the unredacted archive to the Guardian. Lee had to repeatedly badger Assange for the full archive, and initially Assange suggested giving only half of the data set. Other media partners were only given subsets of the data relevant to their experience or geographical region. And this afternoon, that is today, the defense read a witness statement from one Cassandra Fairbanks. The lovely Cassandra Fairbanks. There she is. She speaks on the high-level plan to revoke Assange's asylum. Miss Fairbanks is a journalist based in D.C. who supports both President Trump and Julian Assange. In 2018 and 19, Fairbanks was in a direct message group on Twitter, which included multiple people who either worked for President Trump or were close to him, such as German Ambassador Richard Grenell and Arthur Schwartz, a wealthy GOP donor who does communications for the ambassador and works as an informal advisor to Donald Trump Jr. On October, that's right. On October the 30th, 2018, Fairbanks posted an interview with Assange's mother in the group chat, hoping that someone would see it and be moved to help. Where was I? Oh, yes. Okay. Excuse me for that, people. Fairbanks posted an interview with Assange's mother in the group chat, hoping that somebody would see it and be moved to help. Arthur Schwartz, a wealthy GOP donor who does communications for the ambassador and works as an informal advisor to Donald Trump Jr., was outraged, calling her shortly after and repeatedly insisted that I stop advocating for WikiLeaks and Assange, telling me that a pardon isn't going to effing happen. He knew very specific details about a future prosecution against Assange that were later made public, and that only those very close to the situation then would have been made aware of. He told me that it would be the Manning case that he would be charged with, and that it would not involve the Fault 7 publication or anything to do with the DNC. He also told me that they would be going after Chelsea Manning. I also recollect being told, I believe, that it would not be before Christmas. Both of these predictions came true just months later. Grenell brokers deal to evict and arrest Assange. Schwartz also knew in advance of plans to revoke Assange's political asylum granted by Ecuador. He also told me that the U.S. government would be going into the embassy to get Assange. I responded that entering the embassy of a sovereign nation and kidnapping a political refugee would be an act of war, and he responded, not if they let us. I did not know at the time that Ambassador Grenell himself had that very month, October of 2018, worked out a deal for Assange's arrest with the Ecuadorian government. Fairbanks began to cry on the phone with Schwartz, which led to him softening his tone and saying that Assange would probably only serve life in prison. In January 2019, Ms. Fairbanks visited Assange in the embassy and, quote, informed him of everything I had been told. I know that he was concerned about being overheard or spied on, and he had a little radio to cover up the conversation. I had also met with Chelsea Manning in person and told her that I feared that they might come after her again. 2 months later, in March of 2019, she visited Assange again, but she said this visit was very different. I was shocked at the way in which both Assange and I were treated. Fairbanks was locked in a cold meeting room for an hour while embassy staff demanded Assange be subjected to a full body scan with metal detector before allowing him in the room. I considered at the time it seemed our government was getting what they wanted from Ecuador. As a former senior State Department official told BuzzFeed in January, as far as we're concerned, he's in jail. I noted in an interview with El País in July, President Moreno also said his ideal solution is that Assange may enjoy being extradited if the UK promises that the US will not kill him. Fairbanks then messaged Schwartz asking what he knew about the rumors that Assange may be evicted. And Schwartz called her and made clear that knew I had told Assange what he had told me. This appears to be corroborating evidence that Assange's private conversations in the embassy were surveilled and that recordings were sent back to the US. Assange was evicted from the embassy and arrested on 11th of April 2019. 4 days later, it was reported on ABC News that US gave verbal pledge of no death penalty for Assange. The process of moving Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy started a year ago on March 7, 2018, when the Ecuadorians made their first request to the UK. A request, you say? When the Ecuadorians made their first request to the UK, a letter asking for written assurances that the UK would not extradite Assange to a country where he could face the death penalty, according to the Ecuadorian Interior Minister, Maria Paula Romo. Ecuador's direct outreach to the US came 6 months later. The country's ambassador to Germany, Manuel Mejia Dalmau, according to US and Ecuadorian officials. Dalmau sought a private emergency meeting in Berlin with the US ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, viewed as one of President Donald Trump's closest envoys in Europe, the officials said. During one meeting, Dalmau asked whether the U.S. would commit to not putting Assange to death, according to a senior U.S. official. Grenell then contacted the U.S. Justice Department to see if he could provide assurances with the U.S. government that they would not seek the death penalty. According to the senior U.S. official, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein consented. That enabled Grenell to make the pledge. The agreement between the U.S. and Ecuador was a verbal one, according to a source in the Ecuadorian government. The lovely Miss Fairbanks finally said, Schwartz informed me that in coordinating for Assange to be removed from the embassy, Ambassador Grenell had done so on direct orders from the president. I believed this connected President Trump to those who have been reported as having secured the deal to arrest Assange. I believed Schwartz's statement to be correct because his close personal ties to both President Trump and Grenell are well known. The other persons who Schwartz said might also be affected included individuals who he described as lifelong friends. Arthur Schwartz is very well known and is publicly reported to be a right-hand man or fixer for Don Jr. and part of a circle extremely close to the White House, which includes Richard Grenell, Sheldon Adelson, and others. I'm aware that Schwartz has frequented the White House all the time. His presence is recorded in many videos there, and it is extremely close to the inner circle of people who are very close to the president. In May 2020, let me just read that again at the beginning. So she doesn't actually view Trump as being the one to give the order to um, extradite Assange. In May 2020, the Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal reported new details on the critical role Sheldon Adelson's Las Vegas Sands played in an apparent CIA spying operation targeting Julian Assange. Following Assange's imprisonment, several disgruntled former employees eventually approached Assange's legal team to inform them about the misconduct and arguably illegal activity that they participated in at UC Global. One former business partner said they came forward after realizing that David Morales decided to sell all the information to the enemy, the US. Criminal complaint was submitted in a Spanish court, and a secret operation that resulted in the arrest of Morales was set into motion by the judge. Throughout the Black Ops campaign, U.S. intelligence appears to have worked through Adelson's Las Vegas Sands, a company that had previously served as an alleged front for a CIA blackmail operation several years earlier. The operations formally began once Adelson's handpicked presidential candidate Donald Trump entered the White House.
Playing from Daddy Addy.
Entered the White House in January 2017. So the CIA's spying operation. Let me just read this again. This is, yeah. Las Vegas Sands is the company. Okay, and I'm gonna play. Wait, what is this now?
What the?
Okay, I'm gonna play this Cassandra Fairbanks audio. Hopefully, people can hear it okay. This is her actual conversation with Arthur Schwartz. Let me turn off my mic.
Sandra.
Hey.
You're posting classified information on Twitter. You can't do that.
What the? I'm not posting classified information.
Yeah, Rick. Yeah, that's classified. Yeah, Rick's role was classified. You can't do that.
ABC News already reported it. That's where I saw it.
Yeah, but not his role. You are posting things that are classified that no one knows and has not been reported.
That was reported by ABC News.
I know what was reported. I see what you're tweeting. What you're tweeting is not what was reported. Someone's going to go to jail. You need to stop this.
Yeah, Julian's in jail right now because of this.
I don't want to go to jail.
Well, I mean, I'll delete my tweet only because you're saying that you'll get in trouble.
I don't want to go to jail. Please, I'm begging you.
All right, I will delete it. I was just referring to the ABC News report.
Okay, but like they look into you, they see that we speak. Like that's bad.
I mean, the reason
He's taking orders from the president. Okay, so you're gonna punish me because he took orders from the president?
I wasn't punishing you. I was tweeting from the ABC News report.
Okay.
Remember, I called you about it.
I'm begging you, please.
All right, I will delete the tweets.
Thank you.
He was taking orders from the president. All right. Hi, friends, and probably lots of feds from various different intelligence agencies. I just want to explain that phone call, the context behind it, why I recorded it, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around that this is orchestrated by Julian, that there's all kinds of stuff, and it's not the case. So I'm going to play another call, and I'm going to explain how all of this came about. And yeah, you can take it for what it is, I guess. And hopefully people smarter than me might be able to put some pieces of this together that I haven't been able to. So I guess I'll start. So I also have notes because I don't want to mess up any dates or anything, because people will use absolutely anything to discredit this, obviously. So on October 30th of 2018, I published an interview with Julian Assange's mom, Christine, and she was calling for a pardon for her son. So at this time, I was in a DM group with a whole bunch of people from the campaign and other journalists, social media influencers, and Ambassador Rick Grinnell was in it, and Arthur Schwartz, who works with people like Don Jr., Rick Grinnell, Lee Zeldin, I think. He works with a bunch of people, well-connected guy. And I had always been friendly with him to this point. So about a little bit after I published this article, I posted it in the DM group, hoping that somebody would see it and maybe they would feel bad or be moved to share it with people who could make a difference. It was pretty innocuous. People share stuff in this group all the time. They share articles, they share ideas. It just didn't seem like a big deal. So I threw it in the group, and about 10 minutes later, I got this insane phone call, and it was Arthur Schwartz, and he was completely erratic. And he was saying that I needed to stop trying, that a deal had already been made to arrest Julian, that they were going to go into the embassy to get him. And he was saying that people, that I was involved with the Trump kind of social world, and that I worked for pro-Trump outlet and all this stuff, and that people would understand that I had been supporting WikiLeaks before I knew that Julian was a bad guy, but that they wouldn't be very understanding when all these bad things came out about him. He was saying that Julian got people killed, that people were tortured. He brought up my child, who I believe was 8 at the time. He was talking about somebody who got tortured, and he was like, how would you feel if your daughter got tortured? How old's your daughter? How would you feel about this? And I took it as very threatening, the whole thing. He was threatening my reputation. Some of it I perceived as even more sinister than that. And so I was pretty shaken up by it. And he was just repeating that a deal had already been made, that there was nothing I could do, that even Grinnell and Don Jr. had supported WikiLeaks before they knew that they got people killed. He claimed that there were photos of people who were killed. And as we saw, the prosecution in the extradition case has said that nobody was killed because of this, at least that they know of. The Pentagon testified during the Manning trial that nobody got killed. And so I brought this up. I was like, but they said nobody was killed. And he was like, well, it was classified, and everybody's changed their minds now that they know. And you're going to be a pretty bad guy if you knew that he got American patriots killed and you're still supporting him. He was saying all these crazy things, right? So in January, I went and I visited Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy, and I told him these things. And we used notes, and we used radio that had the white noise. Like, it was just tuned to like a station that didn't come in, so that there would be white noise and muffle our voices because obviously the whole place was surveilled. And I was just trying to be like, what, you know, why do these people say this? Like, why are they saying that you got people killed? Like, this is crazy. And we were just talking about it. And, you know, that was pretty much that. I said that they told me that they were going to go into the embassy. He had told me it wasn't going to be before Christmas, I think. But he didn't give me a real time frame. So that was that. And let's see. He passive, like, the thing is, during that phone call, he kept like warning me, and he kept being like, you know, what are people going to think of you? How's this going to look? They would understand if you stop supporting him now. So I took it as him trying to get me to stop writing positive stories about WikiLeaks and to stop supporting Julian. And that he was like kind of trying to intimidate me out of it, and kind of imply that I would be in better graces with the people in like the inner circle if I, you know, stopped, which obviously I didn't do. Yeah, so there's that. I had also said that, you know, going into a foreign nation's embassy would be an act of war, and he said that not if they let us. And then he just kept saying a deal had already been made. And I didn't know at this point that Rick Grinnell had made a deal with Ecuador in October, the same month this happened. This is October 30th. So I was just like, why does Arthur know this? Like, what's he talking about, you know? And I just thought it was kind of weird, and I brought it up to Julian. So about 2 weeks before his arrest, WikiLeaks began to sound the alarm that they were going to be kicked out, that the government was getting sick of them. On March 27th, I believe, I visited Julian in the embassy again, but the Ecuadorian government locked me in a room, and they wouldn't let Julian come in, and they said that he couldn't come in unless he went through a full body search, and that our meeting had to be in this conference room that was filled with bugs and video cameras, and we didn't want to speak in there because he wanted to tell me things privately, and he wanted to bring that radio in again to muffle our voices, and they wanted to do this full body search. They didn't want the radio to come in. Instead, they locked me in a room for almost our entire visit. I got to speak to him for 8 minutes because they still kicked me out after the allotted 2 hours. And it was just a nightmare. Julian got into a big screaming match with the ambassador. He was saying that he was acting as an agent of the US government. I wrote about it. I'll tweet the link to this out again after. But so when I got back, since Arthur had seemed to clue in what was going on, to the White House and everything, I messaged him and I was like, do you know anything about why they're doing this to me? Because they had never done this to any visitor of Julian Assange ever before this. So this is on March 29th, and he called me and he told me that he knew that I had told Assange and that there was a State Department investigation into who leaked me that information. I had told Julian this in person. So obviously people had access to my visit with him, and they were talking about it. He said that, you know, he understood why I did it, but that because I told him that I couldn't be trusted, and the call ended, and I thought that that was that, but I recorded that call, and I'll play that right now also, and then I'll finish the story. So people were saying that the calls were fake. This is just the voice recorder on my computer. It's not anything fancy. I also broke the screen on my computer. Ignore that, please. But as you can see, this is not edited. It's just the voice recording app.
Hey, what's going on?
Listen, I told you some things that I told you could not be repeated to anyone.
Yeah.
And you repeated them to him. All right. I can't, like.
This is Arthur.
It's emotional for you, whatever, but I can't tell you anything else because I can't trust you. Not that I can't trust you. I can't trust you as a person. It's just like, this is too emotional for you, so I can't tell you anything.
I mean, I didn't tell him much. I just told him that it was going to be Chelsea stuff.
I know, but there's like an investigation now into people at state because of that.
Okay, so also Arthur had told me that they weren't going to go after Julian for the DNC stuff or for Vault 7, that it was going to be the Manning release. I forgot to mention that. And I did warn, I didn't warn them. I told Chelsea that I thought that they might go after her. And I told Julian during that meeting, obviously, what I had heard, because it was weird.
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry.
So, like, very good, like, dear lifelong friends of mine are under a microscope now. So, I can't talk to you about this.
Oh. Well, I'm sorry. I only told him the stuff about.
Listen, I totally get it. That's why I'm not mad. Because you were doing it. What you did, what you said, whatever it was, like, you did it with a good heart and good intentions. So, like, I'll never blame anyone or like, hold something against them. Anyone who does something for the right reasons. But I gotta protect my guys.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I totally get it. I get it. You're being a good person. You are a good person. And you are being.
I also want to note that his tone changes significantly in later calls, so I am happy that I recorded this, even though he seems nice here.
Yourself, and you weren't aware of some other moving parts, but it caused problems for some other people. So I can't compromise my buddies.
Yeah. I just worried. I went there and things are so much worse. I mean.
Yeah, and again, I'll just tell you, like, when everything comes out, like, you're not going to feel as bad. So, but that's all I can say.
Yeah. I hope it's not true.
Listen, I don't know him, so, like, for me, like, I don't care one way or the other. If it is true, then.
And also keep in mind, this is less than 2 weeks before Julian's arrest.
I don't want him to pay, a heavy price. If it isn't true, then he should be subjected to what he's being subjected to now. But from the people that I've heard this stuff from, it's like the stuff that I've seen, like it's not looking good.
Right. I know. I don't know. I'm like personally, emotionally invested in it.
I totally get it. That's the only reason I'm not mad at you.
And then they treated me like a fucking prisoner when I went there. It was insane.
Yeah, I know some of that backstory too, but I can't talk about it.
I don't know.
Hang in there, kid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Listen, you texted me before and I didn't respond. I just didn't want you to think that I was like blowing you.
And even though I have do not disturb on my phone, apparently that does not stop signal calls. So continuing, I'll go back a second so that it isn't chopped up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So this is the part you already heard.
There was no malintent. I know that you weren't trying to screw anyone. Don't give it a second thought. I just don't you texted me before and I didn't respond. I just didn't want you to think that I was like blowing you off or whatever. Like I can't say anything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least we got no collision week to celebrate. So
yeah.
Something to be happy about.
There is that.
Yeah.
I wish that I could have celebrated it more, but I was, dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah. It's like I was dealing with some other disaster when the report came out, so I couldn't even enjoy it. But anyway, at least we got that shit behind us.
Yeah, thank God.
Yep. All right, I gotta run over to Treasury and I just stepped out of the meeting.
Okay.
Back to talk soon.
All right, bye.
Okay, so there was that call, which was friendly, like normal. It was much different than the October call. And so I was like, all right, whatever. Didn't think much of it at the time. So on April 11th, Julian was arrested. I was really upset, obviously. I again asked Arthur he knew anything. He responded with like a barrage of text messages about how Julian Assange deserves a lethal injection, how both him and Manning should die in prison, how I wasn't going to feel bad anymore once all this stuff came out that he knew, which he had told me that they got people killed. And this is not what the US government has said, like either in the trial or previously during the Manning trial. But he just adamantly kept saying, you know, he got people killed, he deserves a lethal injection, all this stuff. Completely different than what he was saying before, when he was like, you know, I know it's fine, he didn't hurt people on purpose. And then I had pointed out that, okay, so then I'll just keep going. I suck at this, I'm sorry, I hate being on camera, as most of you know. So soon after that, ABC News reported that Grinnell had been involved in the deal to arrest Julian back in October, when I got the first call from the person who works for Grinnell. So I saw it was just a line like way down in this ABC article, and nobody had like really mentioned it. And I was like, well, isn't that some shit? Because he called me in October and told me all this stuff. And it turns out it was fucking Grinnell, who is in the group chat and who Arthur works for, who made the deal in the first place. So obviously, like, this makes sense now. So I sent a screenshot of the report to Arthur, and I was like, is this how you knew everything that you told me? And he sent me like a shrug emoji. And then he sent me another barrage of messages about how Julian deserves the death penalty, how everyone involved with WikiLeaks deserves the death penalty. I noted that the article said that Grinnell only got a verbal agreement that there wouldn't be a death penalty, because the UN has been warning that, you know, the US might be doing a bait and switch, and tell him that he didn't, that he's not going to get the death penalty, and then add more charges once they have him here. And Arthur sent another shrug emoji and just continued ranting about how Julian deserves a death penalty. So at this point, I'm like boggled as to why the German ambassador is even involved in the first place in making a negotiation between Ecuador and the US and the UK. And so I tweeted it. I was like, you know, why is the German ambassador involved in this deal? This doesn't make any sense. Grinnell then contacted my employer and asked me to take it down, and was, you know, being weird about it. And I didn't. I refused to take it down. So fast forward to September 10th, President Trump announced that he had fired his national security advisor, John Bolton. I was celebrating bigly, but then Grinnell's name was being floated everywhere to take over the position, including by people who claimed that they supported, people who supported WikiLeaks were like being like, yeah, this is great, let's get Grinnell in there. And I was like, what the fuck, guys? No. And so I tweeted again that Grinnell was involved in Julian Assange's arrest, and that like kind of went after my job for tweeting about it, even though it was publicly reported by ABC News, and I just happened to, you know, highlight it a little bit more. So within hours, I get another phone call from Arthur, which is one that you guys have heard. This time he was frantic. He was, you know, ranting and raving about how he could go to jail, that I was tweeting classified information. And he said that Grinnell was acting on direct orders from President Trump to secure a deal to arrest Assange. Now, whether that means that he gave them an IMF loan, which is what a lot of people think, or he had just, you know, promised the death penalty would be off the table, I don't know. But I do know that after the audio and my timeline leaked to Politico, she reached out to Grinnell she reached out to the ODNI to get a comment, and within minutes, Arthur had already heard about it and was threatening to sue me. She hadn't even reached out to Arthur yet. So obviously he's getting information, and it seems to always be correct. So I'm going to play the call again because people are accusing me of doctoring or editing it. And so I'm going to play it straight from my voice recorder. But I just want to also note that people are saying that I cooked up this scheme with Julian, but I haven't talked to Julian since he went to prison. I wrote him a letter, but I don't even think he even got it because the prison told me I could include international postage stamps so he could write back. But then I later found out that you can't actually include stamps. So I don't think he even got my letters. And they were just being like, hi, how are you? I hope that you're okay. Just know that we're, people out here care about your case and we care about you. It was nothing about Grinnell or Arthur or anything. And this was an unsolicited phone call that I couldn't possibly have orchestrated. The only reason I was recording him is because that phone call in October was threatening. And if you're going to bring up my daughter in the same sentence as torture, I'm going to record your calls from then on. So anyway, here's the call again for people who aren't familiar or haven't heard it. As you can see, it's just the voice recorder on Windows. It's like the normal thing for people who don't know how to do tech like me.
Okay, I'm gonna cut it right there. If people want to listen to that call, I will put the link. She already played it really, but all she does is play it, front to back again. I'm gonna cut it right there. If people want to listen to that call, if people want to do that, again, I'll link that. Thanks for tuning in to this update, September 21st, 2020, day 10 of the Julian Assange extradition hearing and trial. Thank you for tuning in. Stay frosty, and until next time, folks.